Hello everyone, and welcome back to my educational series for Ragnarock, or for the sake of YouTube and to help more people find it, I've changed it to how to get better at Ragnarock. But anyways, welcome back. This is episode 4. This is my high level player tips or pro level player tips, whatever you want to call it, to help you guys improve, hopefully. So as usual, hello, my name is Cave or Cavelad. I'm a professional Ragnarok player or high-level player in Ragnarok with about 400 hours now. Okay, so the 3 main mechanics you need to improve in Ragnarok to improve yourself as a player is accuracy, so perfects and consistency, the ability to full combo or not miss notes during a song, and to activate boosts, or the ability to activate boosts and not miss, or I like to call it the window of opportunity, which is the space in between the notes, which we will explain later in the video. But how I practiced the 3 main mechanics personally, and the way I want to explain how for you guys to do it hopefully, is by using the difficulty ranges. So for perfects or accuracy and consistency, I used low level songs, so level 2 to 5 is what I would recommend doing for that. I just found that it wasn't too slow. Like level 1 songs I find might be a little bit too slow for the majority of people. Sure, go ahead if you want, you can practice the level 1 songs as well, but I think for the majority, through testing, I found that level 2 to 5 was probably the best for it. You can go a little bit higher if you want as well, but I'd kind of stay in that range. Now for practicing or getting better at activating boosts or looking for the window of opportunity, I recommend doing songs from level 6 to 8 or 9, depending on how high of a level player you are. So if you're a newer player or not, kind of middle of the range kind of player, I'd say 6 to 8. But if you're a above average player or competitive player, I'd say you could push it up to maybe 9. That's pretty good for that. I wouldn't say practice the 10s because the 10s are very messy when it comes to the rating system, because if you play both, like if you play OST and DLC and you also play customs, it's very difficult because of how it's the highest rating, and a lot of people will put a load of different types of songs in there, and it can be quite inconsistent for practicing. So I'd personally say don't go any higher than 9, but yeah. Next is more of a, I guess it's the 4th main mechanic, but it's also kind of not that as important. So I guess this could kind of be a secondary objective, is to practice the high level songs. They're also good for practicing control or precision, I suppose you could call it. Now, not to be confused with perfects or accuracy, but precision as in hitting the notes when you want to exactly, and be able to see the notes exactly how you want to, and not being able to lose track or lose control of difficult patterns or faster songs. Obviously, the high level songs are very good for practicing that if you also are looking for that. So, next then, we have the different ways of playing. So, there's 2, well, technically 3, but 2 main ways of playing. So, you have people that use their wrists, and you have people that use their arms. Now, for the majority of people, most people would use their wrists for the higher level songs for speed and stamina reasons, like to, keep your stamina and be faster, because obviously it's a lot faster than swinging your arms around. And then you also have your arms, which is a lot more pinpoint accurate than using your wrists for a lot of people, especially on like lower level songs and stuff. It's a lot more easier to just swing your arms and lock your wrists rather than swinging your wrists around. Obviously, it's a lot more stamina draining. That's why you don't really see much people using on the higher level songs. But the 3rd one I want to talk about is one I use, and it's a little bit of a secret of mine, but I don't mind sharing it, is I actually use a hybrid or mix up both. So imagine playing with your arms, but instead of locking your wrists, you keep your wrists loose. So you get the accuracy of using your arms, but you also get the speed of using your wrists, if that makes sense. I found through just practicing and testing it That was just a really good way of keeping both accuracy and speed. Now, of course, the biggest thing I've noticed with it, depending, well, you know, this is just personal experience, that I tend to lose a lot of speed by using this technique instead of using, you know, just my wrists or just my arms, but not really losing much accuracy. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a few percentage, but very, very low. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, definitely speed. Like I notice now for very, very fast songs, I tend to not use that mix technique and rather just use my wrists. But that's very, very subjective and doesn't really happen that much. So for the majority of it, if you wanted to also copy that, you could definitely use the mix technique or hybrid technique, whatever you prefer to call it. I just found that for like a majority of the songs, it was just really good to use. And I don't know, I really seem to like it. The only thing, if you're trying to practice it, will be to break your muscle memory for the majority of songs you're using it in. Of course, for very, very, very slow songs or very, very fast songs, you'll just probably still use the like habit of using just your wrists or just your arms, but try for in the middle, anywhere in between, try to use, if you want to use that technique. I find it probably will help a lot of people out. Okay. So next thing is 2 really important settings. Now I went over these a bit in my last video. If any of you guys missed it, it was about settings and helpful in-game settings. So I just want to go back over because I find these are pretty, not game breaking, but very, very helpful settings if you know what to do with them. So those 2 settings are Rune Speed and Latency. So firstly, we'll talk about Rune Speed. So Rune Speed, for anyone that doesn't know, and may have missed my last episode, Rune Speed is, put really simply, just the speed of the runes. It's a custom modifier within Ragnarock that you can just basically change the rune speed, like if you want them slower or faster. Now, I wish it was as simple as that, but there's a little bit more to it. So if you don't know the game or you don't play Ragnarock, this is kind of more for you, more so than people that do play, because you more than likely know what rune speed is. So just for people that don't know, while changing your rune speed, it also affects different things about the game. So your spacing between the runes more so is probably the biggest thing. Playing on a lower rune speed will mean that the spacing of between the notes is much closer, rather than if you're playing in higher rune speed, the spacing of the notes is much more greater. The reason why you might hear or see a lot of people using a higher rune speed if they've been playing for a while, if you're more of an experienced player or a competitive player, is that it's a lot more consistent speeds across all levels of songs rather than playing a low rune speed, which is a lot more inconsistent. But another problem is, and a really big one, is that the window of opportunity for the activating combos on the shields is much, much harder and much, much smaller on a lower rune speed rather than a greater rune speed or higher rune speed, because obviously more space between runes. So that's why a lot of people, or high level players, use the higher level rune speed. So make of that of what you will. That's the explanation of it. That's how it works. So a recommendation for rune speeds. So if you're a newer player, you're probably fine on default, which is 12 rune speed. I wouldn't move it. Like if you want to move it anyway, go up. Do not go any lower than that unless you're very, very new. Like this is Ragnarock, your very, very first rhythm game and or VR rhythm game or VR game in general. Yeah, that's the only scenario. If you have played other rhythm games or VR games in the past before Ragnarock, only move it up, because it's a massive disadvantage not having at least 20 rune speed. I would not go any lower for that if you were an experienced player. 20 to 25 if you're newer. It's probably my best recommendation, and if you were more experienced or, you know, competitive player, I'd say in between 25 and 30. That's what most of us use. Now, latency is... To explain latency is basically the input delay, or... yeah, I suppose it would be input delay between your headset and your server, or, you know, PC or whatever it might be going from. So if you're using PC VR, it's the latency between your you know, you connecting to the server from your computer, or if you're playing standalone, it's the latency between you and the server itself, or, you know, between different things. You might think I'm blabbing a little bit there, because I am. I don't know exactly what latency is. I only know how to work it in game. I'm sorry if you're looking for a greater explanation. That's about all you're going to get from me. But to really explain latency, this is probably where I know most of my expertise on it, is basically with latency, you're aiming for 0. So people that play on standalone headsets and play the game on the standalone version, so, you know, if you're using like a Quest 2 or Pico, just playing, you know, without any wires and connecting to a PC or other device, just playing the game on that version, there's no latency on that. There may be some interference from if you're using Wi-Fi, but it'd be very, very small. Well, depending on the connection and strength of your Wi-Fi, if it's reliable internet, blah, blah, blah. So standalone is fine. Usually you shouldn't go too far from 0. Likewise with if you are playing PC VR with a good headset, like, you know, the Valve Index, for example, and you have a good PC, you should be fine. Latency shouldn't be too bad. The only case that I've personally experienced and seen others have a lot of latency problems with is if you're using a standalone headset and trying to use PC VR games. So for example, if you're using a Quest 2, plugging into your PC and try to play the Steam version of Ragnarock. Now I've seen myself, this is the only time that the latency's been really, really bad. And, you know, it might be like -10 or +10. Like, that's the only time I'll see it go that far. Now, my main issue with a lot of people using or messing around with latency is it's not that people are changing their latency, it's that they keep changing their latency. That is the one thing that I guess is really grinds my gears. So, my main issue with it is that it's hindering your performance, especially if you're trying to be like a competitive player and you keep changing your latency. It makes no sense to do that. Like, literally no. Like, the only time, if something happens, like, you get a new setup, you know, God forbid your PC breaks or your headset breaks if you're playing standalone, like, sure. If new setup, that's fine. If you have a genuine excuse, then I don't have an issue with it. But my issue is if, like, people say if they hop every time they hop on, or after a couple sessions they keep changing their latency. The problem is when you test your latency, so if you play between 5 and 10 songs, then you set your latency, then you should have a good idea of what your latency is. So it might be like +4, for example. Then you can set it to -4 because obviously you're aiming for 0. So if, say you have 2 players and you have player A and player B, both of them have tested the latency accurately and have set their latency to what it should be for aiming for 0. Now, player A has done is that they've realized that if their latency is still that high, even when calculating correctly and set it up correctly and have their own baseline, that it's a personal issue, that they are either hitting the notes too soon or too late. Now, there's a couple things you can do, which is, you know, try to relax if you're hitting too early, or try to speed up maybe a little bit if you're hitting too late, or you can stand closer to the drums or a little bit further away from the drums. This can also help with, you know, hitting too late or too early. Maybe if you're standing away, it's hard to hit it on time. You might be hitting too late then, or if you're standing too close to the drums, it might be hard to, you know, hit it on time as well. It's a little bit hard to explain that without seeing footage. I'll probably have something on the screen. But yeah, so say you have player A who's realized that it's a personal issue that they need to work on themselves rather than constantly changing latency like player B is doing. They've changed their latency accurately, the exact same as player A, but they failed to realize that it's a personal issue and they keep changing their latency. Now, the player A, who has kept the same baseline, will improve much quicker than player B, because player B keeps changing his baseline, and it's making it very, very hard on them to improve from that. Or they may improve a little bit, but it'll be very, very slow, and it will not be nearly as much as player A. That's my main issue with it, and I hope that that didn't come across as bad or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain how it is, because I see a lot of people doing that, where they just keep on changing the latency for apparently no reason. Like there's no new setup they're having. They're the exact same setup, exact same internet, you know, exact same PC, blah blah blah. If they're playing on PC VR, but they just keep changing latency because they refuse to realize that it's, or see that it's a personal issue rather than, you know, their setup or their game or something like that. All you need to do is just practice on, or train yourself to, if you're hitting too early, to slow down a bit and try not to panic during, you know, faster patterns usually is when it happens for players. Or if you're hitting too late, maybe try to, you know, stand a little bit closer to drums and, you know, get better vision and stuff like that. It can be multiple different reasons why either is happening. It's not no one's fault. It's just you need to stop blaming the software and start looking at yourself. But anyway, rant over. I'll move on. Now, the next thing is how to learn to play faster songs and how to play difficult patterns. Now, both of these you can do in the practice mode, which I showed last episode. I really recommend watching last episode if you haven't, by the way, because you'll be very confused what I'm talking about if you've no idea. But yeah, the practice mode on the boat is a setting you can turn on, or an option you can turn on, and you can affect the gameplay of any song you're playing. So the first one, so we'll talk about the fast patterns or fast songs that you might not be, maybe a newer player and you're starting to only practice these, or you might be more of an experienced player, but you still kind of struggle with these level of songs. So it's usually probably going to be 9 or 10 songs for, you know, experienced players, or newer players, it could be any level of song. So what I recommend doing for faster songs or faster patterns is going into practice mode, and the first option you should see on the top, if I remember correctly, because I'm not looking at it while I'm recording here, is the playback speed of the song. Now it should be set to 100% if you've not touched it already. What you can do is turn it down to either 95, 90, 85, or 80%. Now 80% being the lowest you can go to, but that should be more than enough if you're really struggling with the song to practice getting used to the patterns of the high level songs as well as the speed. So then obviously when you practice for a bit and you get comfortable with 80%, you know, bump it up to 85 or 90 and just keep working from there. That's all you need to do. It's really real simple. I'm shocked honestly that a lot of people don't use it, rather than, you know, just going insane and losing their minds because they just, rather than doing something as simple as that, you would think people would do it more often, but instead they just go in and just keep playing the song, trying to get a good score, which is obviously going to make you burn out, rather than actually learn anything. Well, maybe if it's not that big of a challenge, maybe you're just about not ready for the speed, or you're just about too slow, then it's maybe not a big deal. You can kind of play keep up. But if you're really struggling, I really recommend using the practice mode playback speed option. Now, for the difficult patterns, it's the same thing. You go into the practice mode, the playback speed. You go to the timestamp on the song, if you can figure it out, where the pattern or patterns you're struggling with is or are. Just keep going through, just playing through them. Now, if you're even struggling with that, you can't even play them, even at a slower speed, you need to, what I recommend doing is actually putting down the controllers for a sec and start to analyze them and practice your readability, it's called. So all you have to do is play this pattern or play the practice mode where your time is set, where the pattern is, put the controllers down and just analyze it, like really sink it, let it sink in what are the notes and patterns in front of you. Because more than likely, if you're struggling at that point, that you're not really used to this level of song, I'm guessing. But yeah, let it just like really sink in, learn the readability, like actually you look at the notes, read them, make sure you understand them, plan in your head, like, okay, I need to hit this pattern first with my right hand or my left hand, you know, something like that. Real simple stuff. That's all you have to do. And then when you get that down, you think you're ready, go ahead and pick back up your controllers, get back on your drums or hammers, and then try to play it a couple times. Obviously it doesn't work, go back, try to analyze it again. But you know, if you're ready, you'll be able to play it. You should be able to hit a lot more notes. You should be able to actually be able to bump back up the speed a bit. You should be able to move towards 85 or 90% speed, and then all you have to do is work back up to 100, and then you're there. You don't have to use practice mode anymore when you pretty much want to just drill it into yourself that during the practice mode, so you don't ever have to worry about that pattern again, because usually for the majority of the patterns, they're usually reused in different songs. So if you're struggling with a pattern, once you learn it, you should be good, because you'll have plenty of other times to practice it like subconsciously during other songs as well, then it won't be a big deal anymore. You'll be good to go. So that's pretty much everything for this episode, guys. If you guys would want me to do anything more, if you have anything, other topics or features you'd like me to talk about, please let me know either in the Discord or in the comments below. I don't have no issue doing a part 2 of this. If anybody wants me to, that's fine. No, absolutely no issues. I hope I've covered or helped a lot of you, or so at least some of you, with some of these tips that I've come across, and you know, techniques and stuff I've come across myself during my 400 hours. But yeah, that's gonna be it for now, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for being patient too. I know this one's been in the works for a while, and a lot of people have been waiting for it, so sorry about that, and thank you again for being patient. But yeah, I'll get going here. Thank you guys. I'll see you later. Goodbye.